Who will win the 2024 presidential election? Oh, okay, cool. We're doing this again. For those of you who don't know, this is the second video I'm making on the 2024 election. The other one was posted a few months ago and is pretty outdated, but you can go watch it if you want. I'll link it down below. Believe it or not, we're just over 6 months away from the 2024 presidential election, and the race has been narrowed down to just a few candidates, most notably current President Joe Biden on the Democratic side and former President Donald Trump on the Republican side. Important third-party candidates include Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Jill Stein, both of whom we'll touch on later in this video. Before getting into all of their differences, let's touch on one similarity between Biden and Trump. Both of them absolutely steamrolled their primary competition on their way to clinching the nominations of their respective parties. Trump's field was far more contested than Biden's though, with 13 other Republicans running against the Donald. In the end, none of them even touched him. Trump maintained a very large lead in most polls against his closest competitors like Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. He clinched his party's nomination on March 12, 2024. Biden, like I said, saw far less contention from Democrats, but made pretty quick work of those who did try to challenge him. He also clinched his party's nomination on March 12, 2024. This feels like a good time to tell you that I'm not a political expert, and this entire video is based on my own thoughts, opinions, and research. With that in mind though, this is going to be very fun, and it's now time to go over a realistic path to victory for each candidate. How do Donald Trump and Joe Biden stack up against each other 6 months out from Election Day? Do any third-party candidates have a shot at victory? Strap in, everyone. It's time, and we're starting with the Don himself. Donald Trump will have a good shot at winning the 2024 presidential election if he ends up winning two crucial states in November, North Carolina and Georgia. This is, of course, assuming he takes all the other states that typically vote Republican and aren't really considered swing states. And it seems extremely unlikely that that wouldn't happen. North Carolina should be the easier of the two states to take. Trump won it in 2020 and Republicans have carried the state in every presidential election since 1976 except in 2008. On top of that, recent polling shows that President Biden only has a 37% approval rating in the Tar Heel state. Now over to Georgia, a state that Trump lost by just over 12,000 votes in 2020. Prior to Biden's victory, a Republican had won the state of Georgia in every presidential election since 1992. So either old Joe's victory was a fluke or we're beginning to see some shifting social dynamics in Georgia. For now though, in our scenario, let's assume that Trump takes both Georgia and North Carolina. If he gets those two states and all the other Republican non-swing states, that would place him at 251 electoral votes, which is pretty close to the 270 he would need to win the election. So how would he get to 270? I know that's what you're thinking. Let me explain. One option would be for Trump to simply lock down Pennsylvania, which is worth exactly 19 electoral votes. That would get him to 270. Another slightly more difficult approach would be to win both Michigan and Nevada, which are worth 15 and 6 electoral votes respectively. That scenario would get Trump to 272 electoral votes, which means victory. But guess what? He's got even more options. He could also take Michigan and Arizona to get himself to 277 electoral votes. Or he could swap out Michigan for Wisconsin in that scenario and still get over 270. The point is, there are multiple routes to victory for Trump here. He could even emerge victorious if he only took North Carolina and Biden took Georgia, but that path would be a bit more difficult. For example, in that scenario, he'd have to take a combination of Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. Something like that. You get the idea though, right? I'm just trying to demonstrate certain paths that Trump has. A good question to ask now though is how many of those paths look likely or legitimate? Well, let's start by addressing the somewhat sizable elephant in the room, Arizona. Just a couple weeks ago, the Arizona Supreme Court gave the go-ahead to prepare to enforce a long unused law that bans nearly all abortions. The law, which is from 1864 and predates Arizona even being a state, provides no exceptions for abortions except if the mother's life is in danger. Now, Democrats have been quick to jump on this, saying that Trump is responsible for this behavior since he appointed U.S. Supreme Court justices that helped overturn Roe v. Wade, which left abortion rights up to the states. And to be fair, a day before the Arizona ruling, Trump said that he was, quote, proudly the person responsible for ending Roe v. Wade. But he also said that the state went too far with its ruling, writing on social media that the state's governor and lawmakers should, quote, use heart, common sense, and act immediately to remedy what has happened. Ultimately, it's unclear what will happen with the Arizona ruling. It could be reversed, it might not be. What's key here, though, is that Democrats have gained some major firepower in the state just a few months before the election. By pinning pinning the abortion ban on Trump, they'll likely be able to flip some undecided voters, which could ultimately swing the state in Biden's favor. Even if Trump doesn't win Arizona though, he's got plenty of paths to victory. Taking North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania would be the simplest route, but others still exist, as I've already mentioned. It would be a bit disingenuous though to not talk about the charges that Trump is currently facing. Regardless of what you may think about the cases, Donald seems to be in a little bit of trouble. In fact, at the time of writing this, he's actively on trial for criminal charges related to a hush money case. More specifically, he's facing 34 criminal counts of falsifying business records. Outside of that case, Trump is facing charges related to federal election interference, Georgia election interference, and taking classified documents from the White House. Once again, regardless of what you may think about this whole situation, Donald Trump is facing 88 felony counts across 4 separate cases, 2 at the federal level and 2 at the state level. You can think these charges are a witch hunt, you can call them complete BS, that's totally fine and that's your opinion. The reason I bring them up though is because polling suggests that a guilty verdict for Trump spells big trouble for him in the 2024 election. 13% of pro-Trump voters said in recent polling that they would not vote for him if he's found guilty in his current hush money trial. Meanwhile, another poll found that 24% of all Republicans surveyed wouldn't vote for Trump if he were convicted of a felony, and that would be more than enough to cost him the election. I know that was a lot of info, so to summarize, Trump's path to victory weighs heavily on his current criminal trials. I'll say this one last time. Even if you think the cases are totally made up, that does not change Trump's current situation. And to be clear, I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm not the person who makes that call. I just think it's important info to share given that it could impact his election chances. But enough about Trump. You know how he may win. So now let's move to his counterpart, the current president, Mr. Sleepy Joe himself. This may seem weird for me to say, but Biden may actually have a narrower path to victory than Trump. Here's why. According to the New York Times, quote, "It is difficult to see how Mr. Biden gets reelected without doing well in the industry battleground states, the so-called blue wall for Democrats. This is particularly true of Pennsylvania, given the state's 19 electoral votes and Mr. Biden's ties there and appeal to middle-class and blue-collar voters." Let's bring back up the map. Biden's best strategy to win in 2024 involves him taking both Wisconsin and the aforementioned Pennsylvania, which are worth 10 and 19 electoral votes respectively. This scenario, of course, hinges on Biden taking all the usual blue states, including Virginia. Yes, I saw your comments last time, I'm sorry, okay, calm down. And that's just like Trump's scenario where he took all the typical red states. If Biden adds Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to his tally, as well as every hard blue state, he'd be at 255 electoral votes, or 15 away from winning. In that scenario, he'd only need to win Michigan to get to 270, or Georgia, or a combination of Arizona and Nevada. However, if Biden doesn't take both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, it means he'll have to take combinations of states where he's polling much worse. For example, without Wisconsin, Biden would have to win Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, or some combination like that, to win the entire election. Of course, Biden isn't without his fair share of controversy either. For example, Michigan is home to the largest population of Arab Americans in the entire United States, and a lot of people there are extremely unhappy with how Biden has handled Israel and Palestine. So much so that over 100,000 people voted uncommitted in the Michigan Democratic primary to signal their frustration. Now, Biden still won the Michigan primary, but over 13% of voters voted uncommitted, which means Biden will need to change his approach on Israel and Palestine. What I'm trying to say is this: Biden's approach on the situation in the Middle East has left enough question marks and created enough frustration that the state of Michigan could swing to Trump. And that would be huge. It would more than make up for a potential Trump loss in Arizona. In order to win in 2024, Biden needs to ensure he's not losing voters in Michigan and may need to change his approach on Gaza to do that. Or it could be that the uncommitted voters in the Democratic primary don't have enough numbers to make a huge difference. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, that's the situation for Biden. As of now, things look pretty tight between him and Trump. But what about other third-party candidates? How might they make an impact? Let's take a look. To answer that question specifically, no third-party candidates have a shot at winning this election. However, one in particular has a chance to really impact it, and I'll get to that more in a minute. Beginning with Jill Stein, it's pretty obvious why she has no shot at winning. She's polling at 3% nationally, and the most votes a Green Party candidate has ever received came in 2000 when Ralph Nader got 3 million. Simply put, she has no chance. Sorry, Jill. Now over to RFK Jr., the frontrunner of independent candidates. If you had asked me 6 months ago whether he had a shot in this election, I'd say it would would be too early to tell, but it would be something to keep an eye on. Well, now I can confidently say that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will not be winning the 2024 election, largely for two reasons. For one, he's polling at anywhere between 7% all the way up to 16% from what I've seen. That's very high for an independent, and it has some pretty big impacts for 2024, but he still trails both Trump and Biden by about 30 to 35 points each. That's a lot of ground to make up in 6 months. Too much ground. Reason number two, Democrats are pulling out just about everything to slow him down. Nearly all of RFK Jr.'s family came out to endorse Biden and say that RFK Jr. should drop out of the race, which is a pretty rough look in my opinion. To sum it up, Democrats are basically trying to frame a vote for RFK as a vote for Trump. But are they correct? It's tough to tell. There are 12 states where RFK Jr. is either officially or unofficially qualified to be on the ballot, with many of those being swing states. In other words, votes for him are going to pull votes away from both Biden and Trump in the states that matter most. But which of those two candidates will lose more votes to RFK Jr. is really hard to tell right now. Democrats are obviously very worried that RFK Jr. will impact Biden's chances in November. A recent poll by NBC, though, did find that votes for RFK Jr. would actually impact Trump more. However, I have to stress that this doesn't really mean much, seeing that it's only one poll and the results are within the poll's margin of error. Basically, I'm stumped here. While RFK Jr. can't win the thing, he's certainly going to have an impact. With that in mind, I'm curious, who do you think he'll impact more, Trump or Biden? Feel free to let me know down below. You might be wondering why I didn't mention Cornel West in this video, and that's because, to put it lightly, his campaign has been an absolute mess. He originally announced he was running as the People's Party candidate, then decided to run as the Green Party candidate before finally deciding to run as an independent. He'll get votes in this election, but since he's very overshadowed by RFK Jr., I didn't think he was really worth mentioning. Okay, wow, that was a lot. How about we wrap this thing up now, eh? That sounds good to me. Three things are guaranteed in life: death, taxes, and politics getting messy. As we get closer and closer to election day, there's going to be turmoil. I mean, there already has been. A man literally set himself on fire a few days ago in front of the courthouse where Trump's trial is going on. Tensions are clearly high right now, and they're only going to get higher. I'm not saying a second civil war is going to happen or anything like that, though. We're not anywhere near that, in my opinion. But as we get closer to election day, and as the 2024 election takes place, we will likely see frustration, anger, and protests. We'll probably have people calling the election rigged if it doesn't go their way, and so on and so on. Far more likely than not, though, it will all end up okay one way or another. I don't mean to get on my soapbox, but I often feel like much of the media sensationalizes politics to generate fear in the minds of Americans for clicks and views. This is probably going to be one of the biggest elections in US history, but that doesn't mean we should let emotions like fear and anger guide us through this election season. You're free to disagree with that, though. Anyways, that's all I've got for this hypothetical. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like and subscribe. More videos coming soon. If you're interested in learning more, all of my research links are down in the description below. I'd highly recommend you check them out. I do all of the research for these videos myself, so if I left something out or got a fact wrong, I apologize. It wasn't on purpose, and I'm always trying to do my best. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hope I see you next time.